Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're really excited. We have another episode to enter into our career library. Before any show, you guys can go and email me, Zach at zachballinger.com. We'll make sure to ask those questions to the guest. Also, we're streaming live via YouTube. So if you have any questions, pop them into the comment box. We'll make sure to get to them. Without further ado, Eva, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so Eva, can you tell us, I know your career had began with civil engineering as well as structural engineering. Can you tell us a little bit about your career?
Yes, so I am currently working as a civil engineering professor at two universities. One is Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Quito, Ecuador, and the other one is the Technische Universiteit Delft in the Netherlands. At both universities, I am dedicating my time to both research and teaching. Before that, I studied at the University of Brussels in Belgium, where I'm originally from. I did there my first master's in civil engineering, and then I went to study at Georgia Tech for my master's in structures. And after that, I went to Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands for my PhD. So my path has been largely academic. In the meantime, I also was involved working in the structural design company Adstren, which is located in Quito, Ecuador. And I also did some short stays in a few other structural engineering firms in Belgium.
I think you're the perfect person to actually come on and talk about civil engineering, structural engineering, because not only did you do it from the private side, but also you have the PhD where you're actually teaching it. So what better person to come on the show and to talk about what is civil engineering? Like a lot of people, my students probably are like, what does civil engineering even mean?
Well, the actual origin of why we call this branch of engineering civil is because it's the second oldest branch of engineering. And that, of course, asks you then, what's the oldest one? The oldest branch is military engineering. And in the very past, everything that was not military engineering was considered civil engineering. So civil engineers are involved with anything that goes from designing and building bridges, which is what really is my interest, to transportation structures, to water defense systems, anything that is related to the general operations of the civil structure works.
That makes sense. So we're talking about roads, bridges. Does it get into buildings too?
Yes. That's building design and building construction is a part of structural engineering as well.
So let's say, what do you do as a civil engineer or structural engineer? Even I don't know that. So what does that role look like? What kind of career pathways are out there for somebody with this major?
The most traditional career pathway would be either to work as a field engineer, so overseeing construction in the field of buildings, bridges, etc., or to work in a design office and design these type of structures. Of course, I see my students after they graduate go into various paths, so you are not limited to really work in the field that you studied for. A typical civil engineer gains a lot of experience in anything that is processes, the use of standards and codifications. So you find civil engineers in any field from finance to some end up in the pharmaceutical business. So they do get some very broad skills that can be used in a lot of industries.
What type of skills do you need to be good at civil engineering when you're talking about what you just talked about as far as field projects, or you're working on buildings or bridges or stuff? What does somebody need to have as far as skill wise?
What we typically say that an engineer needs is a combination of skills that are related to strong mathematical skills, because a lot of the calculations that we do rely on a fair amount of math. good programming skills, because a lot of the routines that we use do require some programming. And then as well, practical insight, quick thinking, what we associate with an engineer, solving problems on our feet. So those are the three typical things that bring together the aspects of engineering education and then the career of an engineer.
That it would rule me out really quick because of the first one, math. I hate it. So if you're out there and you don't like math, or it's not a strong suit, probably engineering is not your way to go, and certainly not mine. So what did you when you talked about being in the private market, you kind of liked the bridges aspect, I think you said. What did you love about it? What was so, where did you find your passion in it?
Every bridge is different. So you cannot roll out bridges the way you roll out cookies from a factory. You have to look at each one individually. And that is really what calls to me, because you have to see in each case, not just the bridge itself, but where is the bridge going to be? Which communities is it going to serve? And from there, you actually find the right way the right bridge for the place in the first place, but also the way to build the bridge, where you have a lot of options on how you build the bridge and make sure it gets in its place.
What was something challenging about it? Or what should people, let's say you're a student out there, you're thinking about this type of career, everything kind of sounds cool when you're looking outside and in, but there's got to be some challenges in the field. Can you give us some?
Yes, of course. There's, of course, a large responsibility when it comes to building structures. And I think we've seen in these past weeks with the Surfside collapse that things can go horribly wrong and people die when structures collapse. So there's a lot of responsibility to design engineers and construction engineers there.
Yeah, I'd say that's a lot of pressure especially if you're building something for a government municipality, where it's a road or a bridge or a tunnel or whatever it is. A lot of responsibility kind of falls on your shoulders. Do they, in state governments, and you may not know this, but I'm in the United States, do they have several civil engineers working on projects, or is it?
At least for the departments of transportation, they typically have, for example, a state bridge engineer. Yes.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. And so, what are the typical, so let's say somebody's out there listening, they're a high school student. What is the typical path to becoming a civil engineer, and what do you need?
You typically go first do an undergraduate in civil engineering, and depending on the country where you study, that may be directly civil engineering, or in some countries you start with general engineering and specialize into civil. For most of the work that people do that is really design, or that is more the advanced elements, you do need a master's. And that typically is, for example, a master's in, if you want to go design and build bridges, it would be a master's in structural engineering.
Very interesting. Now, what did you dream about being when you were a kid? If we put you in a time machine, we took you back on the past when you were 5 or 6. Did you have a dream career you always thought about doing?
Yes, I wanted to become an astronaut.
Wow, very interesting. So science related, mathematics. Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Very interesting. Now, what is, if someone was in the role that we're talking about, like being a structural engineering and civil engineering, are those two the same meaning?
No, structural engineering really is a branch of civil engineering. Other branches that you have within civil engineering are hydraulic engineering. You have building engineering, which is sometimes more the physics of the building, so how cold or hot it gets inside the building. You have transportation engineering is a branch as well, which really is the design of the transportation structure. So there's a wide variety of options within civil engineering.
And when you were back in college, and this wasn't long ago, but when you were back in college, how did you pick this major?
I started as an engineering student. So as I studied in Belgium, there we have the first 2 years where all branches of engineering are together. And then I actually went with the courses that I enjoyed most and went into civil.
That's a great way of doing it. I never even knew that. In the US, you kind of have to pick that. I think after your 2-year mark of you're getting your qualifications, might be a good way to start looking at things as you expose. It's almost like business. My business major exposed me all the functions of business. Why not do it that way? Sounds more. And you probably found that while you were doing that general engineering career. Like you said, you focused on the courses you liked. Obviously, if you like the courses, then usually that can translate into something tangible in the marketplace. Very interesting. What would let's say somebody did a preceptorship and they wanted to be a civil engineer. What does a day look like for them from when the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed? What's that kind of entail?
It really depends whether somebody is a field engineer or dedicating him or herself to work in the office. But let's say that somebody is both involved with field work and design work in the office, which is what you typically have in smaller companies. You will find that somebody, after getting up in the morning, may drive first to the job site and go check how things are going. After that, and depending if there's any problems that need to be addressed right away, they may go to the office, continue work on the design of another structure that may be in still the design stage, so that is not being under construction at the moment. And then maybe they will be having some meetings with clients, running some models of the structure that they're looking at, stopping by the construction site again, maybe another construction site to check in there, and then get home and rest and do it all over the next day.
You can kind of see where that might appeal to some people that don't like to sit behind an office all day. And you really like to be actually out in the field, as you will say. That's probably on site of the job. So if you like physically being outdoors, things like that, they may appeal to a lot of different people. Or it might not appeal if somebody likes working in an office setting and they're like, no way, I don't want to be out in the rain or the cold or the heat. I prefer, to be at an office. That can kind of eliminate that pretty quickly if you have this particular major. So the next question I have for you now is, so you're a professor and you actually teach. What is it that you teach in your engineering? Do you specialize in something?
Yes, I usually teach a course in the design of concrete buildings, which is quite my specialty. And I teach students how to design columns and slabs, floors of buildings. That's the course that I most often teach.
What do you love about your job now?
I love the flexibility that it has, and I love the variety of topics that I get to work on.
That's so great. It's so nice to talk to an expert that did it in the private market, and then you even did it with the government setting, and then now you're back at school teaching it. So you can obviously have a real passion for this type of career. So we appreciate you being on. What do you have? So let's say somebody wanted to connect with you. There's a student out there, they're interested in pursuing this career further, or do you have any social media sites or any podcasts, anything you do like that?
Yes, anybody who would like to reach out to me can find me on my website, which is evalantsocht.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @evalantsocht. On Facebook with the handle PhD Talk, and you can find the podcast that I co-host with a current PhD student that is called PhD Talk.
So Eva, what we'll do, we'll make sure to put those links into the comment section. So guys, if you're out there listening, make sure you check out the comments. Now on the website, can they find all the information, all your social media links right there?
Yes, all of that is there linked.
Okay, perfect. Let's take a couple of questions because we did have a few that came in. So the first one says, how do I know which type of majoring to pick? I'm sorry. I read the question wrong. It says, how do I determine what type of engineering I want to do?
Yes, that's a great question. And I must say that for myself, I didn't have it clear when I started engineering school. I knew that I was good at mathematics and that I liked sciences, and that's about where I was standing. So when you are in the situation that you know you want to go study engineering as an undergraduate, but you haven't quite figured out yet if it's civil or maybe industrial or maybe mechanical, then what you can do is you can start in one of those, and you will find that it's very easy to shift from one engineering major to the other. So you'll find that there's a lot of courses that are common to the core system of the engineering education. And then even when you find after 1 year, I want to make a change, you find that it's easy to slide in horizontally to another engineering track. So I wouldn't worry too much about getting it right from the beginning. There's a lot of leeway there. You are not married to your major. You can always adjust as you go along. And the second thing that you can always do is, before you pick your university and your career, to see if you can visit some of the laboratories, get a feeling of what students are working on, talk to some current students to see what they're doing and what they like, so that you have a better idea of what it would be like for you to study that career.
You gave some great advice there, and I totally agree with that. I'd also add a couple of other points too, is stop by those career service centers, guys, that are on those college campuses. They're a wealth of knowledge. A lot of times these own colleges, especially if you're at a big university in the United States, they have their own colleges that have their career department. So for example, at the University of Tennessee, they have their own engineering department, career service center. So stop by them. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're career coaches that are certified, and they're professionals that can kind of help you lay out some groundwork in engineering, like Eva mentioned. You can also connect with people, alumni, people on LinkedIn. Ask them for 15 to 20 minutes just to talk to them about their career. And if you come at it with a pure intent, somebody really loves their job, a lot of times they're willing to talk about that. And I would take a class. So if let's say you're not really sure. I knew for right in probably the first 10 minutes when I was taking my accounting tests or my accounting class that wasn't going to be a major for me. So kind of scope it out that way. But great tips, Eva. We appreciate that. The next question that comes in, it says, you mentioned that your childhood dream was to be an astronaut. Did you ever think about aerospace engineering?
So when I studied engineering in Belgium, aerospace was not an option. There was a branch within mechanical engineering that would look at aircrafts and spacecrafts, but it was like just a small part of the mechanical engineering curriculum. And the other option that was available was more telecommunications, so satellites and telecommunications. And I did originally think of going in towards the telecommunications track, but then I found that the part of electrical engineering was not really my thing, and that I enjoyed the civil engineering courses much more, and that's when I rolled into civil.
Yep, and that's a unique question, because I never thought about that. That would be it is a small specific field though, and I'm sure it's pretty competitive nowadays. That aerospace engineering, that even sounds difficult. Last question that comes in is, do you know what nuclear engineering means, and what do they specifically do?
Yes, so at my university in Brussels, where I studied, we did not have nuclear engineering, but at Delft University of Technology, where I'm working now, they do have a branch and a nuclear reactor on campus to work on. And as the name says itself, it's really related to all kinds of nuclear applications. And that's not just nuclear power plants, but it's also related to any type of measurements that may use the concepts that you have from nuclear engineering. So you'll find, for example, in agriculture that there's a nuclear application. So it really deals with all the applications of the part of nuclear engineering, which is very related to physics as well.
That's great advice. I didn't even know that. So, we just think of that as a power, a power major, but absolutely you're right. And that's a good way to look at it. You can take that mindset and take it to other parts of life and career. So, Eva, this has been so helpful. Thank you so much for coming on. We've had engineers come on from different parts. We've had mechanical and biomedical, and now we get to add civil into our career library. And we really appreciate you being a part of the show and taking some time to give back to the students and our audience.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.